Dear beautiful souls, today I would like to elaborate a little bit on how past life conditions and past life experience are actually affecting our present life. Most people are ignorant of the fact that it is actually happening, and even if they have some sort of studying process, that they study Buddhist scripture, that they got into Hindu practices and so on, and they got some insight into the conceptual framework of past life memory, it does not mean that you understand it or that you have access to it. This is simply an intellectual conceptualization. But the direct experience of how past lives do affect you in your day-to-day experiences, that's a whole different matter. Please always understand that meditation is supreme. It will always be more profound than anything that you can read or study or try to assimilate in terms of concepts or knowledge. So what I'm speaking about today is for those who are willing to go on to the journey of meditation, because only when you're on the journey of meditation will the information long-term actually make sense to you. So as I said before, the majority of people is ignorant of the fact how past life experience actually influences them, but some may have slight moments of déjà vu, for example, when they go to a country that in this lifetime they have not visited, but they feel in a way strangely familiar with certain places, with certain cities, or the energy of people. They might feel a certain feeling of being home with certain cultures. They might obsess over watching documentaries with regards to these type of cultures. So déjà vu is a very simple base layer where your spiritual guidance system is telling you that something of significance is happening here, some sort of pattern that you need to become aware of. But in a more direct way, and in a way that actually causes a lot of suffering in the experience of the majority of people, past life memories actually influence you through your emotions. As a very simple example, if you get triggered by certain experiences, you might be in the presence of people who do not get triggered by these experiences. So sometimes even the psychotherapists struggle with that when they have a client and the client clearly has a trauma response, but they can't find the cause of the trauma except, for example, if they do past life regression hypnosis. So trauma that goes past the current personality is basically a multidimensional emotional object. And that is very hard to describe. Let me go about it a little bit like this. Imagine that you had 100 different lifetimes, and in these 100 different lifetimes you have seen 100 different oceans. And you went to the beach, and every ocean felt a slightly bit different, smelled a little bit different, and you had a different experience on that ocean. So if now, as the current human being that you are experiencing, you go to a beach, all of these memories, these 100 of different experiences of going to the beach, will be subconsciously activated in you, and there will be a cocktail of emotion coming up. But if you're not a meditator, you will not get, let's say, pictures or visions or flashbacks of a more profound nature where the multidimensionality of that experience would actually become clear to you. To understand past lives, we need to understand that time doesn't work linear. So that means that you could consider past lives more as an idea of parallel lives. And that means when you come into a situation that other versions of you have experienced, you might experience a multitude of feelings and sensations and emotions that you cannot place. There is a reason why you cannot place these particular inputs. For most of you, it is because you are protected by your higher selves from having that experience. If you're still dealing with current life trauma and current life difficulty, and you find it hard to step out of memory and achieve such a state of presence that you would move into stillness, that means a place of non-reactivity. If you struggle with that, so information that you receive on a daily basis, for example, in your family life or politically or on your job, triggers you, then if you would add more information to that, your mind would very, very quickly become overwhelmed if it's not through spiritual practice conditioned in such a way that its reactivity is tremendously reduced. So that means actually that your emotions, as the cocktail of the multidimensional other lifetime experience, arises in what you experience as your present moment, but is the totality of the memory of you. But of course, without the proper yoga, without the proper sadhana, there is no possibility of decoding that information correctly. Now, in order to do that safely, it takes a while to develop the spiritual maturity where you reduce your reactivity. Please understand that reactivity is, in its essence, violence. That's very hard for many to accept. Reactivity is a resistance to the present experience where something in you says this experience is not allowed to be, something is wrong with this experience, and you experience a fight or flight response in your body, and it starts hardening, the breath starts become accelerated, your body tension is building up, the shoulders become hard, you start biting down, your jaw becomes hard, the back stops straightening, and there's a little hunching over, a shelling up. When that happens, the energy flow is interrupted in your system. So people who do this constantly, they develop, of course, at some point, certain illnesses because it's not natural for the body to be constantly tense. So if, for example, you have a lot of beliefs that you filter your experience through, and these beliefs are of a negative nature, then it leads to a hardening or an emotional response in your body. Now, if you struggle with that, you need to deal with your current incarnation first. That means you need to develop a meditation practice where you can observe your current ego, what negative beliefs it has, why does it become hostile, why does it harden itself. And when you start working with that and you do your proper shadow work with that, then at some point we can get into past life experience. To make it a little bit more concrete, I would like to give an example of how directly it can manifest in our lives. I one time had a client a while back, a lady who was in a marriage that she didn't want to stay in anymore. And she asked me, why can't I divorce this man? And I asked this individual, I asked her, well, if you think about divorcing him, where do you feel pain in the body? And we did a little body scan exercise, and that woman told me, well, there's pain in my knee. I said, okay, let's have a look. Because of certain yogic practices, I have access to that meta information. So I started looking into her knee energetically, and I saw in another lifetime in the Middle Ages, she was next to a man who was the same man that she was married to in this lifetime. And he was pulling a wooden cart through a muddy road. And suddenly the axis of the cart broke. So the cart started tilting to one side and suddenly fell. And it fell on her knee and broke her knee and crippled her. And because of that experience, in that medieval past lifetime, she had a subconscious belief that she was dependent on that man and could not survive without that man, because in that lifetime, because she couldn't walk correctly and she couldn't take care of the family, she felt a deep shame and an injury because she was reliant on the man and she couldn't participate in the family life as her heart desired, that she could take care of her children the proper way. So this belief still lingered, even though she wasn't crippled in this lifetime, her knee was not injured, but the karmic body that carries all this traumatic information is actually interfacing with the physical body and with the nervous system. So when we do, for example, Zazen practice, and we start reducing the reactivity in the system, and we achieve a point of stillness of minimum of thought activity, we can then scan our body, and by focusing on particular pains in the system, at some point we learn how to decode that information by not posing any resistance to it. So in this way, past life memory is something very direct and very imminent. It is not something that is long gone. You might have had an experience of drowning that could have been, let's say, 3,000 years ago, and currently you are afraid of water. These are very, very real phenomena, and I encourage everybody to not be afraid of this. In fact, when we have traumas of past life, it means obviously that we survived them, because we're still we had our current body. So no matter what happened to the previous body, you're still there. So only your suit or your interface to the physical experience was truly affected and truly died. The essence of you, of what you are, did not die. So therefore we actually do not need to be afraid of these past life traumas in this way, because the very fact that we have past life traumas means that we survive them. That's the very true essence of our nature. Now, why are past life experience important for any spiritual practitioner? Well, simply because in my experience, when I've been working with different people, there often comes a point in life where they are at a breaking point. What do I mean by that? There's a certain incident maybe that makes them doubt their spiritual practice and makes them doubt the pathway that they're going. And a lot of times they make choices out of ignorance. So for example, I had situations, for example, a man came to me in Japan in the 13th century, and he could have been a mystic. He had the talent for it, he had the meditative ability, but at the time he had a girlfriend who didn't want him to become a monk. So she came to me and said, well, my boyfriend here, who I want to be my husband, who I want to stay with me, can he not learn from you, but he lives in town? And I said, no, we're not doing that. Because in order to work with him, to do the proper work, I have to remove him from the society. So we can deprogram the society beliefs and actually get him in touch with his inner guidance system. And I cannot have him live in society if he has so much deprogramming to do. Of course, I didn't explain that in such conceptual detail, but I kind of let her know that this is not how it works. Well then, as quickly as possible, she got pregnant on purpose. And she got pregnant to tie him down in the responsibility so he wouldn't become a monk, and she was successful in that. I have met the same person a few years ago, and the situation was exactly the same. We met again, he became interested in spiritual practice, and look at that, the same woman, the same soul that is now, not the same woman, but the same soul that is now expressing herself through a new interface, also female, then suddenly had the same strategy and tried to tie him down with getting pregnant, and succeeded again. The irony of this is that every time the ego makes a decision like this to, for example, choose worldly goals, or in this case family, which of course it's a value, yes, it's very important to have children, but for some souls they're supposed to go deeper at some point. But souls often loop, they repeat, and this is the karmic trap. So what will happen, for example, they will meet a spiritual teacher, and they're saying, hey, spiritual teacher, I would follow you, but just right now I have met my soulmate. I have so fallen in love. And now I gotta follow the soulmate. And it's so very important. And I swear to you, I've never, ever, ever made this decision before. But then I go into meditation and I see, for example, that in consecutive lifetimes, for example, in 5 or 6 lifetimes, they made the exact same decision. They met their spiritual teacher. They were supposed to advance, and then they fell into a lower frequency possibility, which, for example, would be attachment to romantic love, or being caught up in materialism, or narcissism, or whatever the story is. So often people will believe that currently, because they only have access to the memory of their current ego, so they believe that their choices are actually genuine right now, that it's an individual, genuine choice that they have never made, but they have repeated these choices over centuries. And because of this, it's important to investigate past lives deeply at some point in our spiritual practice, so we don't repeat the same loops. In the same way, I had my own experiences with these type of trappings. In one of my lifetimes, I was a Tibetan Lama. And I was in a certain monastery, and I was surrounded by other Lamas who had more experience. And they knew of, let's say, a secret holy man that lived in the mountains of Tibet. But this holy man wasn't a Buddhist, he was a yogi, a sadhu. And they said to me, we think you're ready, we want to introduce you to someone. And they sent me up to sit with that sadhu in a cave. And I walked in as this Tibetan Lama, and he looked at me, and because he could read my past lives, he said to me the following thing. He said, grow your hair back, drop your monk robe, put on a loincloth, stop chanting mantras. I was furious. I said to myself at the time, what a heretic, what a blasphemer. He doesn't understand Buddhism. Why is he telling me all these things? And in my pride, in my narcissism, I ran out of the cave. But that sadhu was actually acting from a deep level of compassion. He wanted to get me through what we consider the last gate. So he understood I was attached to the idea of Buddhism. I was attached to the Tibetan schools. I was attached to the robes, to the temples, to the way things looked, to the atmosphere of it, to the beauty of it. But this attachment stopped me from attaining real emptiness, shunya. So he tried to basically help me deprogram that personality so I could be reborn, resurrected in a way, by letting that personality die and then enter a deep state of samadhi. In that lifetime, I ran away from that teacher. So I skipped on enlightenment. Obviously, if I would search now, if I would look into other lifetimes, I would realize that this was probably not the first time I had that pattern, that there was a certain attachment to a certain tradition or structure, and I wasn't willing to surrender this. So, in that moment, I probably also thought I'm making a real, genuine, authentic decision here by deciding that that sadhu, who is actually an enlightened holy man, is a blasphemer, so I don't have to listen to what he has to teach me. And that is why it is important to discover the past life loops, because they will trick you, they will try to make you believe that you've never made this decision before, and that right now is a very, very authentic, genuine moment, but it isn't. It's just a repeat of the same old soul trap. Please contemplate on this. Thank you for listening, my friends.